cover the program, yes, and we are here to cover this program. We are here to cover this program, and we also publish any information that want us to publish for you. That one is free, but this one, because of the printing, that one is 5 CD. Any program or any information, we can publish it for you. That one is free. We are going to so many programs to cover the programs. That's why we are here. Thank you, sir.
At this juncture, would call on the first vice president of the institution to give us a welcome address as we are all seated. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You are welcome to this public lecture. This is the first public lecture that we are holding as the executive, so the new executive or council of the institution. And we plan to have many of these such public lectures. And you should expect more to come in the coming days and week. We will also expect members who are in the other regions to also organize some of these public lectures, so that you can. It's a forum for all of us to meet, to network, and also to share ideas. So we are privileged today to have a very distinguished personality to give a talk. I will invite Yvonne Lowe to introduce the guest speaker.
Good afternoon again, and I'll take the opportunity to welcome all of you once again before I go on with the artist's biography. In fact, I'll call him a gentleman. I'm lost for words, actually, because when I first saw his profile, I was like, hey, the guy has done a lot of work. Maybe we have to organize another program like this to talk about him. So I am privileged to have read everything, and I'll present to you just a summary of it. Born and bred in Ghana, Koforidua precisely. He had his education at the Koforidua Roman School, then went on to secondary school in Cape Coast, another Roman Catholic school, St. Augustine's College, then to the University of Ghana, the only university in Ghana, where he acquired his bachelor's. This gentleman has 3 master's degrees. Yes. One from the University of Ghana, and then also from Canada. But I saw another one also. Prof? I saw another one also. Okay. All right. So he went on to read his PhD, and now he is here in Ghana trying to come back home. He's been all over the place. He was at African or Global Studies, teaches there, then also taught development and natural resources and public policy at Northeastern University, Boston. where he has been the chair of department between 2002 and 2005. Then he became the vice provost of the same place between 2003 and 2008. He was a Carnegie University of Ghana senior visiting scholar from June to September 2015. In recognition of his scholarship and other works on Ghana, our speaker was awarded a Fulbright as a senior scholar at the University of Cape Coast, the Institute for Development Studies from 2011 to 2012. Since 2009, his research and publications have been on Ghana's emerging oil and gas sectors. Besides publications of his work on our oil and gas in Africa Today and Ghana's Public Policy Journal, that's a special issue on OG, which is oil and gas, he provided critical input into Ghana's Petroleum Revenue Management Act, PRM Act 815/2011, and was a key resource person for developing the curriculum on Ghana's oil and gas for UCC, University of Cape Coast's new OG Studies Institute. He also led the technical team that wrote Ghana's first Public Interest and Accountability Committee report in 2012, where they documented Ghana's petroleum revenues and expenditures. In addition, he used his expertise to assist the Ghana TUC Trade Union Congress, their main national labor organization, to produce its first policy paper on oil and gas. He was also one of the first researchers to study existing oil and gas skills in Ghana. His other interests are Africa-China relations and the roles of technology and science and human capital in Africa's development, plus the African Union, the World Bank /IMF, and the World Trade Organization in developing countries. Members of this honorable institution, kindly help me invite no less a person than our own Professor Kwamina Panford.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Yvonne's introduction reminds me about what I had happened to Martin Luther King before. Thank you. What happened to Martin Luther King before he got assassinated, that he was an event and they introduced him and he got up and said, it looks like somebody's saying something very different about a different person. He didn't realize they were talking about him. First and foremost, I wish to thank the executive of this committee for all the hard work that has gone into getting us here this afternoon. If you've done any of these things, you know how much logistics and how much you have to put into getting things like this done. And I'm not going to mention individual names because I'm always afraid of leaving somebody out of the list. And I know that there are some people who do the upfront work and those people who do the backstage work. Usually I even like to thank the person who cooks the item 13 because it takes everybody to get us to where we are at this point. When Sam and I and Benjamin were discussing, Raymond rather, were discussing the presentation for this morning and afternoon, we agreed on the topic how Ghana's natural resources will be taken very good care of. I also like to say this. I deliberately emphasize in my biography the fact that I was a little boy born in Koforidua. I wasn't born in big town, Takrady, Accra, or Cape Coast. Why do I stress that? It's my way of expressing how good Ghana as a country has been to me in terms of the background and preparation. In my book, in the preface, I talk about the fact that I thank all those people who have gone ahead of me, providing me as a kid born in Koforidua with such fantastic opportunities to be able to do the things that I do. On a personal note, I also like to say this. Yes, I've been out of the country for a long, long time, but I'm still a Ghanaian. Some of the things you like and admire about me, I learned them from Ghana, and also my bad habits, I also learned them from Ghana. So if you like me, then you like Ghana. If you don't like Ghana, if you don't like me, then you wouldn't like Ghana. Here's the order of presentation. I will do a quick overview of Ghana's experience with cocoa, timber, rubber, palm oil, gold, diamond. We'll get some technical background information on Ghana's petroleum from early period to the present time. The significance of the discovery of oil on June 2007. What has been going on since the first oil flowed December 15, 2010. I'd like to make some crucial observations which I think are very important for practitioners and the academics amongst us. I'd like to very quickly look at the resource curves with respect to our Ghanaian neighbors, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Angola, Democratic Republic of the Congo, and even small country Benin. Apologies to anybody who is from Benin for me describing his or her country as a small country. And in fact, in connection with Sierra Leone, we're going to be playing some golf. So I hope you brought your golf sticks. We'll talk about the good news with respect to Ghana, what Ghana has done right. And on that note, I would like to spend a little bit of time to stress this point. There are a lot of good things with Ghana's oil, and there are even a lot of other good things that have happened in Ghana generally. So I'm not here to bash Ghana or to criticize Ghana or to criticize any particular regime or government. I'm trying to tell it as it is from the point of view of an insider-outsider. So I'm an equal opportunity offender in terms of heaping praise where appropriate and criticizing when things are not going right. After all, that's what professors do most of the time. They criticize. What in this context we'll try to do is we'll try and bring in policies and suggestions, practical things that can help us do better. And then we'll look at the challenges, what Ghana is not doing right, what Ghana is not doing right, some of the weak links in our system, and we'll conclude by looking at Ghana's oil and other resources where we are. And in between, I'm going to squeeze in a clip of a video, and at the end of the presentation, I have a list of videos that I would recommend that you watch when you have some free time. First slide, please. Okay, this is the location of where most of Ghana's offshore oil is located. Jubilee Field, for example, our first commercial oil field is about 56 miles out in the sea. If you flew, it would take you about 45 minutes. If you went by boat, for whatever reason, it takes a little bit longer. One of the interesting things about the location of Jubilee Field and our other oil fields is that if our border with the Ivory Coast were straight, then maybe Ivory Coast would have had. Yeah. So Ivory Coast would have had a much more legal claim. But we'll see what the International Court in Germany decides. In fact, even at this point, one of the things I like to ask is why we as Africans or members of the ECOWAS community, why can't we create our own mechanisms for mediating these types of disputes? In my past research and publications, one of the things I've recommended is that right here at Legon we have LESIAD. At other universities we have higher institutions of learning that dabble in international matters. We should begin to think about how we can equip our own selves to handle these kinds of issues. So why should we go to Germany to resolve this at an international arbitration? The next slide, please. Okay, this is the infrastructure for Jubilee Field. It was provided by Tolo around November 2011. This subsea structure is several miles of tubing and pipes and all kinds of fancy kinds of equipment. It is 1 mile down in the sea level in the Atlantic Ocean in the Gulf of Guinea. At top of this infrastructure is the Faso Kwame Nkrumah. Next slide, please. Again, the Faso Kwame Nkrumah itself is a story about what others are doing in terms of development and what we in Ghana are not doing. This is an old retrofitted oil tanker. It used to be an oil tanker with a single hull. It was taken to a port facility in Singapore at the cost of not more than $43 or $45 million. After it was retrofitted and brought to Ghana in the form of a flotation, production, storage, and offloading, Faso Kwame Nkrumah, named after Ghana's first president. Initially, my understanding based on my research, this Faso Kwame Nkrumah was brought to Ghana by MODEC at the cost of almost $1 billion. It cost $850 million. My understanding is that the people who facilitated the Faso Kwame Nkrumah coming to Ghana made $5 million commission or profit. So it comes to Ghana, and I believe 2011, it was sold by MODEC to Tolo at $750 million. I'm just a social scientist, a lawyer wannabe. I have a PhD in law and public policy, but I can't go to court. You do the math, right? From $43 million to $750 million. That is how much money, part of the money that goes to Singapore. It's called the FASO because it's the floating production, storage, and offloading facility. Ghana now has 3 of these, all made in Singapore. The first one is the FASO Kwame Nkrumah. The second one is named after His Excellency John Ivan Atta Mills. And the third one is named after His Excellency John Agyekum Kufuor. The interesting thing about the Faso Kwame Nkrumah is that its processing capacity is something like 120 million barrels, 120,000 barrels of oil a day. That is what limits how much Jubilee Field is able to produce in a day. So let's say if we had decided to buy another Faso Kwame Nkrumah and attach it to Jubilee Field, we could have increased the size of the oil that is produced daily by Jubilee Field. Next slide, please. Okay. Nope, you went too far. Go back. Go back, please. Go back. Is there a problem? I wanted us to go to order of presentation. Yeah, that should be like about, yeah, okay. Since I'm expected to discuss Ghana's natural resources, of course, most of you are miners, so you're interested in gold, diamond, and oil. I'd like to talk a little bit about Ghana's experience with cocoa, timber, rubber, palm oil, gold, and diamond. Oh, by the way, since approximately 2000, the year 2000, Ghana has been dabbling in the production of coffee. I remember one of the things I said to colleagues when we started looking at what to do with our oil revenue. One of the things I used to say in the presence of the Agricultural Workers Union is that we are not going to use oil money for cocoa. We are not going to use it for rubber. We are not going to use it for coffee. I'd rather have us use it for other things. In a minute, I will explain why. It's interesting. Ghana started dabbling in cocoa and gold and diamond together about the same time. Just when Tetekwashi was bringing cocoa to Ghana, we were also looking into timber, rubber, palm oil, gold, and diamond. And so these raw materials, and it's also very interesting, some people from the Western region will claim that when you used to go to parts of the beach, you will see cocoa, you will see crude oil pellets that were showing up. We never visited some of these places, but I recall very well that when we went to the 6 oil-bearing districts in the Sekondi Takoradi area and towards the Western region border with the Ivory Coast, some people used to tell us, although I never saw this with my eyes, that if you went to certain places, you could scoop something that was like crude oil and maybe even feed it into your diesel propelled engine and it will run. By the way, a few words about how I got my information and my methodology for doing things. In 2009, I came on a sabbatical at IDS, University of Cape Coast, and I heard some of my colleagues at IDS planning to conduct a baseline survey of the 6 oil-bearing districts in Ghana. And I have a confession to make. When I first heard things like the Dutch disease, I had no idea what the Dutch disease meant. I had heard a little bit about gas flaring in Nigeria, and that's all that I knew about crude oil. The closest was going to Goil or Shell and pumping petrol and getting into my car and driving it. I knew very little. But I said to myself, I'm going to use this opportunity to learn as much as I can about Ghana's new oil. So I came back to Cape Coast University in 2011, 2012, and at that time they had conducted most of the survey for the, most of the field work for the survey. But then what I did was I continuously went to places like Takoradi. I visited Tolo Logistics Center. I made friends with one of the naval captains at the military base, and the only thing I couldn't do was to get onto an oil rig and also go for a boat ride with him. We were working on that when I had to go back to the United States. Also, 2011, 2012, I got in touch with the Ghana Trade Union Congress and helped them write their policy paper with respect to oil and gas. Some of the quotations on local content come from their work. And whilst I was doing that, I also made friends at the Ministry of Energy, and that time that was responsible for petroleum, looking at the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, looking at local content. So one of the things I always did was I always went to officials and talked to folks about what exactly was happening with Ghana's oil and trying to make some impact. In fact, 2010, after I returned to Boston, one of the things I did was I spent a lot of time on the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. I was one of those people who thought naively that we could persuade the Ghana government not to use crude oil as collateral for loans. I spent a lot of time, looked at all these draft bills and made as many profuse comments as I can. I remember very well in May 2011, sending a lot of comments back to Ghana. In terms of my fieldwork experience, two things stick to my mind very, very clearly. November, when we went to Takrady, we met the regional coordinator, Mr. Clement Dandore. And what we tried to find from him is what are his concerns about Ghana's discovery of oil. We were sitting in his office and he pointed toward the Atlantic Ocean and he said, even with gold that was onshore, you couldn't do much with it. So what would you do with oil that is offshore? That quotation has stuck in my mind in a very long time. Because as we all know, the history of gold and diamond production in Ghana has been disastrous. It hasn't only been disastrous in terms of the health, safety, and environmental effect, but it has also hit our pocketbooks, our pockets very hard. A lot of Ghanaians don't appreciate this highly unusual situation. Since about 1989, gold and diamond companies are freely allowed by the government of Ghana to take these precious minerals and materials out of the country, package them, market and sell them, and then turn around and tell the Ghana government how much profits and taxes they are paying. I don't mean to knock or to criticize any particular company, but I remember very well, since I've been around in February, I turned to graphic and I see Newman striking its chest very proudly. We have given $750 million or $1 billion to the Ghana government in form of taxes. The question is, who on the Ghana government side is verifying these kinds of very important revenue and balance sheets? Another thing that struck my mind was, this was the time, September, October, when Tullow, as the operator for Jubilee Field, was releasing its initial environmental impact assessment or statement. This thing was so thick that to download it at IDS was slot in the CD. At that time, pen drives weren't too popular, so we used CDs. Or slot the CD in the computer and then go home for the weekend. That's how long it took to download these things. I have a PhD in public policy, and one of the things I remember happened to me was I decided to read one of the executive summaries for about a week. Other than playing soccer or football, eating and sleeping, all I did was to read the executive summary. My colleagues, that's what happens. Tullow, Cosmos, and Adako, all those companies would take these types of thick documents, again, the question that I wish to pose even at this juncture is, how are our interests, environmental, financial, being protected under these kinds of circumstances? So, for whatever reason, some Ghanaians don't appreciate the fact that before Jubilee, there was Saw Pond oil field, and before Saw Pond, some Russians and others were exploring for oil in Ghana. The first good news came with Saw Pond, where we started producing a few barrels of oil, and then you fast forward to June 2007, when we announced that we have found commercial quantities of oil. What is the importance of Ghana's June 2007 discovery locally and globally? Locally, of course, each one of us was very excited that we have found the El Dorado. It It was going to make us very rich, and all of us were going to have jobs, and honey and whatever it is was going to be flowing through the streets of Ghana. Globally, Jubilee Field's discovery, June 2007, marked a very important discovery even in the global market for oil, especially in these parts of the world. Just to put things in perspective, according to Wall Street Journal, just at this time when Ghana found its Jubilee Field oil, the largest discovery in the Gulf of Mexico, the US border, was going to be producing about 109,000 barrels of oil daily, whereas Jubilee Field minimally was supposed to produce 120,000 barrels of oil a day. So exactly on December 15, 2010, Ghana lifted 55,000 barrels of oil, and it's very important for sale to the international market. As of now, not 1 teaspoon, not 1 Voltic bottle, not half a teaspoon of Ghana's oil has been refined locally. Everything is exported to the international market. Within the last 1 month, I've learned one terrible news about Ghana's oil. We are now exporting, I believe since 2016, $3.9 billion worth of crude and importing something like $3.4 billion worth of crude and other refined petroleum products. The interesting thing is this: we export our crude cheaply and export the imported crude more expensive than our locally produced. Did somebody say why? Okay. I have learned about 4 reasons, some of them ridiculous. One, I'll begin with the most ridiculous one. Ghana needs to brand its oil. 2, when we sell our oil overseas, it enhances our oil. It enhances our national prestige. My response is: can you go to the global market and buy things with prestige? And some people say that the Tema oil refinery is so bad, technically and financially, that there should be a very long distance placed between Ghana's crude and Tema oil refinery. And fourthly, Ghana's oil, by all indications in terms of its gravitational properties and fluidity and all those things, is one of the best in the world. In fact, it's called the Mercedes-Benz of oil. So let's sell our Mercedes-Benz and then bring in a Kia or a Hyundai. Apologies to anybody who drives or a Fiat or Yugo or something like that. You see, the problem is, maybe because I'm not an economist, I think about the transaction costs. How much would it cost you to export your oil, and how much would it cost you to import your oil? And then, of course, the fact that you are literally exporting good, well-paying jobs plus technology. So those are some of the issues that at times we don't get to think about. One cannot talk about resources without mentioning the resource curse. This is a very counterintuitive theory. It goes something like, and I'm simplifying as much as possible to make life easy for all of us. This theory says that literally anybody, and especially an African country, a developing country, or a third world country that has natural resources is cursed by the resources themselves. What I do, and I talk about that extensively in my book chapter, is that it's not a curse, it's a question of mismanaging the resources. Even the mismanagement of the resources can be attributed to issues like your colonial experience, plus the fact that there's something called the Cold War, during which the United States was interested in helping certain regions in the world, and in Africa, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Liberia, and the rest were seen as just sources of raw materials. So it is not the raw material itself that curses you. It is your approach and the internal and external circumstances. Like, for example, everybody who dabbles in the kinds of things that I dabble in international relations knows that from independence until Buhari came into power, Nigeria has relatively been more pro-capitalist. Apart from Awolowo or Azikiwe, I've never heard any Nigerian leader say, I'm a socialist. But guess what? The Soviet Union spent $1 billion building a steel mill in Nigeria that did not produce one single nail. Contrast that with Singapore that built the Faso Kwame Nkrumah. The United States and their Western allies helped Singapore to build a steel industry that ends up with these kinds of very expensive structures. So whereas in Nigeria, there's more interest in extracting the crude oil and using it in a place like Singapore because of the Cold War. See, the Americans, the British and the French wanted to use Singapore and others to show the rest of the world that if you align yourself with the United States, these are the goodies that you get. So the little aid that went to a place like Nigeria was mismanaged. The Soviet Union came in, spent $1 billion, and Nigerians have nothing to show for that $1 billion steel mill. It's also very interesting to look at Liberia. Liberia has hung out with the United States maybe 1804. Guess what happens? Firestone comes to Liberia, builds the largest rubber plantation in the whole universe. Gets a lease for 99 years and pays something like 5 or 6 cents an acre for the land. And then America turns around, gets Firestone to loan the Liberian government money to build a port, and that port is used to export the rubber out of Liberia at an unusual interest rate. I believe when Charles Taylor came into power in Nigeria, he renegotiated the lease with Firestone and increased the rate, the royalty or the payment for each kilometer or whatever it is of land for 50 cents. That's how much Liberians earned. Sierra Leone's case is fairly pathetic. By the way, these are the lease rates for Ghana's oil. It's 5%. For LPG, it's 3%. I talked to some of the people who drafted Ghana's oil and gas leases, and these are the explanations. The country is new at this business, and therefore we have to attract prospectors and oil companies to Ghana. That's why we offered the lowest rate for oil and gas in the whole world. These are from some of the people who actually drafted the leases and some of the important legislation. As if Ghana's case is not worse, Sierra Leone has lease rates, according to the Africa Progress Report, headed by Kofi Annan, Kamdesu, the former IMF managing director, and Ned Rubin. Ned Rubin was President Bill Clinton's Minister for Finance, Secretary of Finance. According to these three gentlemen and others, Sierra Leone has one of the worst lease rates for natural resources in the entire world. In fact, I used to have difficulties quoting the right figure. I used to say 0.5. It wasn't 0.5. It's 0.05. Half of a percentage point. That's what Sierra Leone is getting. Maybe at this point we'll see the video on Sierra Leone. Remember I told you we're going to play golf? I was kidding. We're going to watch a video. And then I'll tell you the story about that golf incident. And what is still happening? They found in Sierra Leone the size of a diamond about the size of a golf ball. It was sold in the country for about $1 million, and then it was exported to most likely Antwerp in Belgium. Sold for about $4 or $5 million. Guess how much the Sierra Leonean government got? $30,000. Again, when you have some free time, please do the markup, the profit rate. See, it is this same $30,000 that the Sierra Leone government is supposed to pick the garbage, weed the grass against mosquitoes and all those kinds of things. And this is privatization run amok. In the interest of attracting foreign direct investment, this is the kind of situation that we have created in Africa. Similarly with Galamsey in Ghana, it started about 1986. By 1989, we had liberalized the use of sodium cyanide and mercury. Ghana set itself out to be the leader for the rest of Africa in terms of offering very liberal, outrageously rock bottom rates. Remember I said that Jubilee filled the royalty for oil is 5%? When the European Union assisted GNPC to draft the Model Petroleum Agreement, the recommendation was Ghana should charge 12% for crude oil. But for whatever reason, our leadership decided to charge 5%. Seriously undermining the country's ability. Oil, we have 10% carried interest, 5% royalty, making 15%, and there's a markup of 2.5%, making a total of 17.5%. When I was publishing this book, late December 2016, I thought Tolo and Cosmos were paying corporate taxes. I was wrong. Exactly a week ago, today is Thursday, right? About the same time I was at the Petroleum Commission on N1 Bush Highway. I was surprised, but not surprised, to learn that Tolo and Cosmos for 2015 or 2016, zero corporate taxes, 0 cents was paid. One of the things the companies do is they bring in expatriate personnel. The person could be fanning the oil wells for production, and the person's total salary is tax deductible. Whatever money they wire out of Ghana, no fees or charges. Equipment that they bring in come tax free. Basically what we have done is we took the old bad gold and diamond laws, maybe cut and pasted oil, diamond and gold, and replace it with oil and gas. That's what we've done to our oil. What are some of the good things that Ghana has done? We passed the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. The only thing missing from that act is the attempt to ban the government. They call it putting a ring around oil revenues to prevent the state from using oil revenues for loans. Most of the things in the Petroleum Revenue Management Act 2011 amended 2015, most of the conditions and issues there and the approach is not problematic. We also established a petroleum commission which is expected to manage and to regulate the entire upstream sector. And we also passed local content December 2013. And finally, August 4th, 2016, we passed the Exploration, Development and Production laws. All these are good, but the problem is we got the sequence wrong. We should have started with the Exploration, Development and Production laws. Those are the most important things that we should have done, because that deals with metering for the oil, who controls the data, what happens if there's an oil spill. But it's very interesting. Why did we look at petroleum revenue management first? There's this unspoken thing that especially our brothers and sisters in the private sector need to hear. Let's say since about 1986 up to about 1989. As a matter of fact, was it June 1986, most African finance ministers and their surrogates met at a special UN session in New York. Are there any Catholics in this room? Is anybody Catholic? God bless you. You know what happened at that session? The Africans got on their knees and said, we are culpable for all the mess in Africa. We didn't care about fair trade, unfair trade, the history. What some people call the commodity trap. The fact that if you export these kinds of raw materials in this current context, you are not going to succeed. You have to do something else to it. So these Africans, starting about 1986, began admitting that they are responsible for all the problems in Africa. And then in 1989, the World Bank wrote a book titled Toward Sustainable Development in Africa, where they didn't only say government should stay out of business, but the root cause of all of Africa's economic, financial, fiscal mess is caused by the state. What are the implications of this? If you watch our structural adjustment programs, if you watch our economic recovery programs, they used to write them at places like Oxford, Cambridge, Yale, Cornell, and bring them to this part of the world. And oh, by the way, they called us a pupil of the IMF and the World Bank. And the idea behind this approach is that you, the African intellectual, you are lazy, you are not trustworthy, you are incompetent, and you are corrupt. So you should be cut out of the process of development. So Africans needed to be sidelined, and two, the state in Africa should be made to stay away from this as far as possible. Close your eyes for a minute and think about this. How do we regulate Faso Kwame Nkrumah without the role of the state? How are we going to collect taxes if the Ghana Revenue Authority does not have the capacity to collect the taxes? So what is happening is we are being told that we are thieves. Therefore, pay attention to the monies that get into the Bank of Ghana petroleum funds. Don't worry about what is coming in. Some of you deal in hydrology. It's like you're building a dam and you are concerned about evaporation, not how much money is actually flowing into the dam. That has been our approach. We are not trustworthy. In fact, I did talk to the U.S. Secretary of State for Africa, Johnny Carson. And you know what he said to me? He says, you watch your own Ghanaians. That was when ExxonMobil was trying to take over shares in Jubilee Field. He said, don't worry about your own people. In fact, that is the model. That's why one of the first acts we passed of the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. There are two sides to it, whether it's gold, diamond, or oil, or cocoa. There's the revenue and there's the expenditure. We were told to focus on the expenditure. That was our concern. Not how much money is coming in. As a matter of fact, apart from, is it Mohammed Amin? I always get his name backwards, the Deputy Minister for Natural Resources. He and ASAP and a few others, and maybe me. We are the only people who are saying, how much are we getting from the oil companies? Yes, corruption is a problem in Africa, but in my household, I can't only look at my expenditure. I have to look at how much revenue is coming in. And that is the side we've not been paying much attention to. In the meantime, the oil companies are here to make money, and they are making their money. So we did some things right, but the sequencing was problematic. And it looks like we've repeated the same fundamental mistakes we made with gold and diamond with respect to oil. We've done some nice things compared to, let's say, Nigeria. We're only 7 years into oil production. We're thinking about local content and how to make sure that we deal with some of these issues. But we are not there yet. And those are some of the challenges that Ghana still faces. What are some of the weakest links in our system? Local content. Can you go to the next slide, please? Keep on going, please. Okay, let's take a look at some of these things. One of the reasons why I like to go like this is I like to quote officials in terms of what they promise. Boa and Co promised that local content will be meaningless unless it engendered local content and participation. The TEC talks about the effective, meaningful participation of Ghanaians in all phases of the oil and gas industry, requiring the availability of Ghanaians with relevant skills. And this is one of my favorites. By February 2012, $16 billion had been spent, $15 billion, 16 had been spent on Ghana's oil, not only on Jubilee, but all over the country on oil and gas, and only 5% had been sourced locally. I understand the figure has now jumped to about 20 billion. With local content, typically this is what happens. There tends to be emphasis on numbers, how many Ghanaians are involved. In fact, one of my informants was so nice that he actually gave me the manifest of personnel on board some of the drill ships and equipment on the seas near the Takoradi area. What I discovered was that most of the Ghanaians were bunched at the bottom. They call Rastabals, or what's the other name for? They are like handymen and women, unskilled. I looked at how many motormen we had on the boat or rigs. There were none. There was no Ghanaian medical doctor. In fact, I did go to the Tolo Logistics Center at the Takoradi Air Force Base. I did not see one black pilot. Of course, how are you going to have black pilots and sailors? In fact, doing some of my tours at the Takoradi Naval Base, I don't know the technical name to describe this, but you know, like how when a ship berths at the harbor or port and somebody has to tie the rope around the anchor, all that was being done by white people. All that was being done by white people. In part because we didn't put our local content process in place until 2013. And of course, we've sold Blaster Line, we've sold Ghana Airways. So who is going to be training seamen and pilots for us? This too represents what the problem is in terms of our inability to do local content. By the way, we've passed a law that says if it is exploration, development, and production, that is purely upstream, it has to be 5% Ghanaian owned. If it's other services and facilities, it has to be 10%. This picture actually came from Legon. I was having lunch with the dean of the business school, and I was playing with the toothpick. And I said, by the way, where does this toothpick come from? And the dean said, it comes from China. See, a country that cannot make its own toothpick, how are you going to do local content in some of the technologically most intense and advanced type of systems and production? By the way, if you travel between Cape Coast and Abuasi, Cape Coast and Kumasi, even some past Aburi area, you see bamboo growing wild. Meanwhile, our bamboo factory has shut down because we don't have raw bamboo. This one is my favorite. It's actually from the top of the water closet at IDS. It says, proudly made in the UK, and it has a warranty or guarantee of 25 years. When was the last time you saw anything in Ghana with a warranty? I'm hoping that in July I'll stop running around speaking and lecturing. And one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to tour factories in Ghana. By the way, Open Daily Graphic, Ghana Manufacturers Association award dinner, Alomo Bites and all those kinds of things. So the little manufacturing base we had is gone. It's gone out of the window. Next slide, please. If you compare Ghana's manufacturing base with that of, let's say, Singapore, other countries, ours is like a pyramid, or those of you who are fancy, take your spouses to places like Paris, can think about the Eiffel Tower. That is how the Ghanaian workforce structure looks like. See, I used to believe that things were a little better in Ghana till I started looking closely at the data. And correct me if I'm wrong. I was shocked 2011, 2012, writing a study for the Ghana TEC on skill levels and learning that the base of the Ghanaian work structure is full of semi-educated, semi-trained. Some people barely third grade or fourth grade education. See, how are we going to compete? People don't realize this. People sit on the Faso Kwame Nkrumah and play with computers and joysticks. I know of a case from Wall Street Journal in which a welder without college education came to work on Jubilee Field and was making $140,000 a year. That is the kind of money. And by the way, this $140,000 is deductible from the taxes that Tolo, Cosmos, Anadaco, Eni, and all those multinational oil companies owe you. They take them out of their taxes. And also, by the way, I learned a very interesting lesson. We in Ghana think we are doing very, very, very well. We are untouchable. The World Bank and IMF star pupil. Somebody showed me a letter, an email, the original email from Benin. Tolo Cosmos was prospecting for oil in Benin, and they needed a sample catcher. And they were going to bring foreigners into Benin. The Benin minister, sector minister, wrote to this multinational company saying, you either come with Benin oil or you don't come and do business here. Some of the data I've seen on Nigeria, even Ivory Coast, indicate that if you get on an oil rig, it's about 65% those nationalities. And in the case of Ghana, it is 35%. And they are burnt at the bottom. You hear things like, we are a poor third world country, we don't have the money, we don't have the technology, we don't have the skills. My response is, a few years ago in Kenya, where Cosmos or Tolo was about to commission its first oil, the Kenyans made the multinational oil company do this kind of distribution of workers. 10% non-Kenyans, 30% Kenyans, and 60% from the area where the oil is being produced. There are lots of myths Yes, there are technical challenges. You may hear things like Ghana is a poor country, so we don't have the means to pay for the oil. By the way, you are subsidizing Tolo, Cosmos, and Adako, and all those companies. Take Faso Kwame Nkrumah, 750,000. Our amortization or depreciation rate for capital equipment is something like 20%. So all that Tolo does is every year it takes out $150 million from the taxes it owes the Ghana government. Who is the Ghana government? You and I. Meanwhile, people tell us that we are poor. Meanwhile, we are subsidizing these companies. How did they do this? I'm not an accountant, but I learned a very interesting thing. It's called thin capitalization. Thin capitalization. Cosmos, Tolo come to Ghana. They use the International Finance Corporation to get them loans. One, the interests are tax deductible. And two, to some extent, they use the good name of the Ghana government as warranty for the loans. And then on top of that, you see, if you were lucky enough to get into the oil industry, you'll not be able to get all these tax breaks. April this year or last year, I was reading an interview with the Nigerian Minister for Solid Minerals. As if his eyes are closed or his eyes are open. He wants to do to Nigeria what has been done to us with our gold. He says that the multinational companies will come with their finance and technical expertise. Nigeria has squandered between $300 to $400 billion between when it first found oil and started producing oil and right now. Who is in a better position to finance these things than multinational oil companies? So there are all kinds of myths. Some of them very pedestrian, some of them half-cooked, and a lot of untruths. So those are some of the challenges. What is the way forward? I have a lot to say about these things, but I'm going to try to be as brief as possible. It's very simple. Anytime you take raw cocoa beans, in fact, cocoa beans itself is very interesting. Until 1991, when I started coming to Ghana repeatedly, I naively thought we had stopped exporting cocoa and timber. Then I'll hang around Cape Coast Takoradi areas and I'll see these big trucks carrying timber. And I'll see trucks shuttling cocoa from the so-called hinterland to the harbor. Since 1991, there's a hidden secret about Ghana. When I came to Ghana, I read graphic not more than a month ago. I learned we have two cocoa seasons, the small one, 20% cocoa beans, and the big main season, 80%. The small season, 20%, is the one that local cocoa manufacturers are allowed to buy. The 80%, you know what happens to it? There's something called syndicated loans. It started about 1992. They export the cocoa beans ahead of time as collateral for loans. How are you going to manufacture chocolate in Ghana if you've already pledged next year's cocoa beans for loans? That is why we can't process our own cocoa. Maybe during question and answer time, I'll explain why I think these things go on in Ghana. So, first and foremost, as Professor Hill in the 2006 book specifies, anybody who produces cocoa, rubber, timber, diamond, uncut, gold, unrefined. Let me give you a practical example. That's what I learned from living in Switzerland from 1985 to 1986. Ghana produces gold and processes it as little as possible. And then send it to places like Switzerland for storage, processing, and marketing. Have you ever thought about this? How much does it cost to rent a storage room in a place like Switzerland? And when we had Ghana Airways, we couldn't trust ourselves, so Ghana Airways couldn't even fly the gold to Switzerland. We used foreign airlines. It's like spending money, throwing away money. The technology, the income. You imagine all the security guards and all the accountants that will be handling all these precious commodities overseas. That is how we lose. So value addition, first and foremost, with respect to oil, we have to do damage control. After 10 projects, we should look at how we can maximize taxes in the coffee, whatever it is, Ghana has to think about how they can process it. And please, don't sit down and say, we are not technologically advanced, we can't do it. The other time I was talking to an African that I used to respect a lot about the M-Pesa system. How many of you? A population of 45 to 49 million people. And half of the population uses M-Pesa system. But guess what? All handsets, all telephones in Kenya are imported. I have here an article from Wall Street Journal. This is what the Indians are saying. If you're not making it here, you're not selling it here. In some ways, that's how we have to go. I have an article on my phone in which, by encouraging phone companies to locate in India, they are beginning to develop a cluster of technologically advanced companies. You have to start from somewhere. You have to start from somewhere. That's where the state is very, very, very important. I bet you, most of you know about biotechnology. Its correct technical name is life sciences. 2007, the black governor of Massachusetts said that Massachusetts was going to spend $100 million to beef up its biotechnology. Indiana did the same. North Carolina, Research Triangle, California. See, just 4 or 5 states escaped the economic downturn around 2008 because the state had taken the lead in leading industry into a new area. What it does, it creates jobs, it enhances productivity. After all, if you're a worker, would you care whether it is a government-funded project that puts bread on your table? And they look at the multiplier effects. They have the multiplier effects that enhance the society's benefits. We also need, paradoxically, to use our oil and gas. By the way, maximum 40 years is gone. North Sea oil, they are beginning to decommission. Saltpond, I think, is in the process of being decommissioned. So 20, 30, 40 years max, that resource is gone. It is our opportunity to not only diversify economy, but seriously to think about going to science, technology, engineering, and math. In that respect, I have bad news for some of you geoscientists. I'm not too happy with our facilities at Legon, at Tech, and at UCC. We don't have the right laboratories. We don't even have the right numbers of personnel. It's not going to happen if we don't devote some of our oil. In fact, I'll go out on a limb. I hope there are some journalists here. I would want to get this word out. We have the Heritage Fund, where we are keeping money for young people for their future. Sweden, the last time I checked, about 2015, had almost $1 trillion saved up from its oil and gas. See, Sweden is able, Norway is able to accumulate that $1 trillion largely because at the time when it started in the 1990s, interest rates were very high. Take it from me, I used to benefit from those high interest rates in the United States. But now I don't bother putting my money in the bank. I don't. Because in some cases, we have negative interest rates. Ghana is accumulating bonds, European bonds, that are barely earning 1% a year. Meanwhile, we're borrowing money at 10%. I strongly oppose the idea of free secondary school education in Ghana. It's like your roof is leaking and you want to extend the building without fixing the leakage first. I'd rather have some of the heritage money on condition that we can discipline ourselves to use some of this heritage money to address that Eiffel Tower shaped workforce. If we can take some of the oil money, make sure that we train some of our Takrady boys wherever they are, so that the education is content-based and they are certified. The insurance companies play the game of, you give me a qualified Ghanaian with the right certification to satisfy insurance, and we'll employ him or her. The money is sitting in European banks, earning paltry interest rates. We should seriously think about how we can use that. I'm not saying we should do just free education. What I'm saying is that we should be disciplined. It shouldn't be used for anything other than working with Tech, Legon, Kevas, Kekam, Takrady Polytechnic, and all those polytechnics to see how we can leverage this money for optimum training of Ghanaians. We need to think very critically about these issues. With respect to something like the Crop Research Institute, for example, I would like to see the Crop Research Institute funded to look at how yam, cassava, plantain, okra, and others, we can generate better seeds to feed our own hungry stomachs. We are now importing tomatoes and onions from Burkina Faso. One way or the other, it's costing us money, it's costing us jobs. I wouldn't want us to focus on cocoa. Yes, if we are doing cocoa, can you go to the last slide, please? This is what I would like to see us do with cocoa. No. Right. Yeah. This is a pomade made of coconut and jelly. This is petroleum jelly, and this is Sam's jam. I would like to see Sam's jam on the Faso Kwame Nkrumah. By the way, when we started, the yam, the bread, the water were all imported onto the Faso Kwame Nkrumah. So petroleum jelly, those are some of the things that we can do. We can combine petroleum jelly with coffee, shea butter, copra, and cocoa. Nice perfume and sell it. First, let's sell it amongst ourselves. Let's start. And we should emphasize science, technology, engineering, and math. In that respect, I want to fire a warning shot. I don't want to hear anybody get up and say, children are our future. Honestly, if I'm in a room and anybody says that, I'm going to raise my black hand and raise hell. Because we are not investing in our children. And without that, we'll not be able to produce the personnel, the skills that are needed. One very important piece of suggestion or recommendation, Please, if we are sending our students overseas, we should task them with an assignment. We should let them develop a mission, a purpose. I sat with the former chief executive of Hyundai, United States, and one lesson that I learned is this, and those of you who are heads of department or administrators in this room will bear me out. Legon sends somebody for training in Canada, the person comes and Legon says, we have no place for you. Tech does the same thing, Kevas does the same thing. We have no place for you. Meanwhile, we spent public money educating this person. What I learned from the Honda chief executive is that they have, like, if you go to our halls, I hope we still have those pigeon holes. You come back from overseas, you are not going to struggle to find a place to work. It's like clockwork. There's a system. And by the way, these people are serious. They have a plan, they have a mission. It breaks my heart when I sit at meetings in Ghana and people are planning programs. I went to Takoradi Polytechnic. How much are you going to charge your students? We haven't decided. How many students are you going to enroll? We haven't decided. How do you plan an educational training program when you haven't determined all these parameters in advance? I was in a room with a high-ranking Ghanaian. This was a public event. And somebody raised the issue of all those mushrooming oil and gas training institutes. What the heck? This was a former vice president. He was asked this question. He said, it is not the government's job to regulate these mushrooming institutions. That was his response. It is the government's job to create. I don't expect any government anywhere in the world to give every individual a job. But it is the responsibility of those who call themselves the elite, the politicians and the leaders, to create an environment in which anybody that is capable of working will have a job. That is the final word that I would like to make. Thank you.
We thank you very much for a thought-provoking lecture. Questions and answers, please.
Thank you very much, Prof. That's very insightful. I will start from your last statement before I forget. I mean, sometimes we elect or appoint or vote politicians into high office, and then they don't deliver, and we tend to accuse them. But then when we look at us, we see that these people came from us. They are not different from us. But then the moment they go to that high office, then we want them to do magic or do something drastic, but they were part of us before they got to the office. So what I want to ask is, what are we going to do for that? I will call it psychosocial reengineering of our body fabric, so that some of all these things that you are saying, to be honest with you, there's nothing new under the sun. We know them. Most of them are known. But what happens when people get to that office, they are not able to think or implement or do as would take us forward? Thank you very much.
I have to be very careful in answering the question. You remember, right from the start, I said a lot of Ghanaians like me come in and parachute and pontificate and at times even confound the issues. But One of the things I think has happened to us, in fact, two things. Even Osajefo himself and his group that created the 1957 Constitution and the 1960 Constitution, I think erred by not asking the question, what type of political system will work for us? I'm too young to have noticed this, but apparently by the time I came to Legon, it appeared to me that in spite of all the Africanization and indigenization, Ghana was still trying to make out of Legon a kind of Oxford or Cambridge. I would stretch the same analogy to our political system. And let me say this. I dare not say this because I was not in Ghana June 4th. I was in Ghana June 4th, but I was not in Ghana December 31st. You see, I look at my brothers and sisters in Ghana, and the impression that I get is they look at what used to happen in the days of what is called culture of silence, right? And I apologize for saying this. We moved from a time when Kenke Ga or Fanti is made, it's not even cooked and people are buying it. So if you compare it, it's like the light. Now we have some light. For a lot of Ghanaians, that is better. Two, my wife usually disagrees with me when I say this. The Western system and our so-called development partners have really done a number on us. We've been made to believe that we are doing great compared to other African countries. So when somebody in fact, I usually carry a yellow folder. I carry it on me and I call it Good News Ghana. Often when I speak like this, it's like, oh, you came and you criticize, all that you say negative things. I'm assuming that the first way out of your situation, see, if you're doing a good job, we have a mission, we have a policy, we have the legislation, we have the regulations, then we review, ask what has gone wrong and what needs to be corrected. We are very content. I'll give you a practical example. The other time I was in Koforidua, chilling. Yeah, I also chill. If I have a picture of me and the Jacko, for those of you who think I only work, right? And I met this young Ghanaian. He just graduated from Cape Coast University and he's calling himself an intellectual. So getting to my point, I think by 1992, we had lost an opportunity to rethink our political system. It is a very expensive system. I have a friend at GhIG. He's a nice person. We kid that he should be the assemblyman. I'll predict for the first time they'll vote for him. The second time say, oh, this guy, he behaves like a white man. He takes paper and pen to calculate all the monies. We have created a political system that, in my view, is not working. Look at Parliament. I have instances in this book in which some gold and diamond leases are taken to Parliament and retrospectively they pass all these agreements. They pass all these agreements. So I think it is very expensive in terms of, you can insult the president. So we feel good. You can express yourself. But I look at how we even park in this country. Between here and Cape Coast, you see tractors and all, some in the middle of the road. So maybe some of us should begin to think about how can we try and straighten this crooked thing. It costs money. I wouldn't reveal my source. This morning I learned that the party in power today has started thinking about the second term. It's only 6 months. They started thinking about a second term. So we need to, this oil thing, for example, like I said, we started it backwards. We didn't have a vision. The 1992 Constitution requires us to have a development plan. We don't have it. Petroleum Revenue Management Act requires us to have a development plan. We don't have. The two parties are playing us. They are playing us and not doing what they're expected to do. So we need to rethink about. But you see, I hesitate to say this because who am I to say that Ghanaians should not enjoy their newly found freedom? But what I ask is, what is at the least? Some of our people are drowning. Some of them are being set on fire at petrol stations. People are being our roads. Look, I've driven on ice. I've driven on ice that is bigger than a block. I'm afraid to drive through here, and I'm not a coward. I'm so afraid because of the lack of discipline on our roads and our streets. And we should seriously think about that. And I say to a lot of young people better wake up, because there may not be any country for them. The oil will be gone and other things will be gone. Look at Galamsey, for example. You know the interesting thing? I've not studied this scientifically. But even in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, I don't think there's been much damage done with sodium cyanide and mercury like is happening right underneath our noses in Ghana. Those countries have been at war. We have not. And we seriously, we need to think about these things. Maybe during the break, you and I can have a tete-a-tete on that.
Okay, so in the meantime, we'll hold on with the questions whilst we...
Well, before we continue with the questions, I would like to seize this opportunity to recognize the presence of the Archbishop of Accra, the most very Reverend Gabriel Palmer Bucknell in the house. Thank you for coming, sir. Sir, we thank you for gracing our occasion, sir. We can now continue with the questions.
Okay, so we'll take just 5 questions and that will be it. So, and then we continue when we are networking. So 5 questions before he...
My friend, I have a couple of questions. I think my first one is, you talked about the weakest links in all of this, and our inability to take up local content. How do we reverse the order? My second question, you looked at the Eiffel Tower, the structure for the labor force. Do you like it? And if you don't like it, what other structure would you propose for Ghana?
Hold on, please.
Okay, my question is on the Heritage Fund. I am part of those who believe that that fund should be invested. And I believe that it's just because we are not investing it well. And that if we really invest it well, if not at all, let us buy the shares of those resource companies that are taking our money away. I think we'll be better off. And then secondly, concerning value addition or beneficiation, I think sometimes, you see, it's theoretically it's good to say we should beneficiate. But I think that sometimes we should look at the economics of beneficiation. After all, cocoa processing factory is processing our cocoa, but they are not making any profit. As to what the problem is, I don't know, but at least they are beneficiating, and yet the economics of that beneficiation is not good. So I think we should look at all these dynamics before we, suggest certain solutions.
Prof, whilst you were talking, I nearly wept because of some of the things that you were saying. As young as I am, I'm looking at people that are younger than me and seeing how we've come so far as a nation. We've not done much with our natural resources. And you ended by saying you weep for the young ones. And you were saying we need to rethink. We need critical thinking. This morning I was reading something from the net. It said China's reserve to productivity of their natural resources is in the red zone. So now the new policy for China is attack on Africa's natural resources. Attack on Africa's natural resources. People are thinking ahead of us as Africans. Now China is planning for the next 50 years how to exploit the natural resources of Africa. But we are sitting here not thinking. And he said we should think. How do we start this thinking? Thank you.
Okay, so last one. Last one.
Thank you, Prof, for this insightful experience. The indiscipline issue associated with the system that we have in Ghana. I have an experience. The other time I was driving on the road, main road, and then I saw the police were arresting these motor riders. Yes, at the bus stop. And then all of a sudden I saw another motor driver. Yes, they were policemen. They were riding, they were arresting them. And another time, at that incident, I saw another motor rider who was just passing. And there was a policeman sitting at the back. He has also contracted to take him to a different place. And then we took a shot of it. And it was so amazing. Those of us were laughing, people were laughing. Look, the policemen who were arresting Okada people, as we say. Now this is their colleague also who has taken a motorcade, and then they are also passing. So I realized that the issue of corruption, it's only not grand corruption, but petty corruption, and even weak institutions is also affecting us. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I would like to answer the first question about what to do. Whenever I go anywhere and people ask me, "Oh, Prof, thank you," I say to them, "Well, let's try and make our country better." That's the only thanks I get. Second, and more importantly, we are lucky. Look, the Jubilee Field contract, they are all on the net. What scares me is I meet business school deans and they don't even know about these things. I don't expect a business school dean to read these things, but at least to have a vague sense of what is going on. I take refuge from the fact that in spite of the bad news and all my criticisms, like I said, my good habits were developed in Ghana. By the way, I wrote this book when my leg was in a cast. When people come to me and they ask me what happened, I said, that's Ghana for you. So it can be done. It can be done. The Eiffel thing, the weak labor structure, see, to some extent, I don't blame Ghanaians and other Africans. Are you all right? I don't blame Ghanaians and other Africans. You see, something happened that we may not be very conscious of. When the Soviet Union collapsed, we were lulled into a false sense that planning was not important. See, in the United States, they plan. I'm very ambivalent about staying in my school right now in the US, but one thing I've learned from that school is how to do things. It is not a place where you sit down and people give you things. You have to make things work for, and that is very, very, very important. Going back, what I learned from the Koreans is that the leadership sat, and in most societies it's about 5-10%. That plan and get others to come along. Unfortunately, that's why I have a jackal as my last slide. Can you please show a jackal? Because I don't want to be accused of, for once, make a tree, when you talk like that, people begin to even feel like you're a horrible human being. You don't want us to have fun. But on a serious note, a society that spends more time having fun than working, I don't feel comfortable in that society. In the sense that we should find solutions to have. Nobody is going to work on this educational thing. Fortunately, there are models in and out of Africa that we can watch. STEM, you need your scientists, you need your engineers, you need your mathematicians. We have to start doing it. Some time ago, we half-heartedly do it. I was going to use a word, but because the Archbishop is here, I can't use it. During my time, we had priorities. Yes, I come from a social science background. But I still like to stress that to get these things done, you need your scientists and you need your engineers. And also your accountants and your social scientists, even your lawyers, should be trained in a particular way. In fact, I make this prediction. Thank God, the Petroleum Commission has advised GMPC, Tolo, and Cosmos to stop their scholarships. We were sending people all over the country without any plan. According to some of the data that I've come across, you need something like 1 engineer to about 4 workers. When planning or thinking about any of these things. So we can start with Takoradi Polytechnic, Kikam, the places that are close to the oil field. Yes, geographically, start with them and see how best. What some of the things we can do is we have carpenters, we have masons, we have electricians. Tolo, Cosmos, and Adako, they are saying the guy or the woman has to come with the paper qualifications. So we should sit down, think about how we can get these people the paper qualifications. Do we need to train trainers to train these people? It is not going to happen by chance. I've been to some of the private universities. Only All Nation University in Koforidua has anything that is close to model equipment or pumps or anything. In fact, it's better equipped than Legon, based on what I've seen so far. Better equipped than Cape Coast University. But that's very rare. There's enough. In fact, I'll go out and suggest this. Maybe the university should stop buying cars. That's what I've been thinking of late, and use it to buy equipment, buy whatever that is needed to do these things. Somebody has to make that decision. They will not be nice and funny. Your own parents may not like you, but we need to think about those things. And like I said, some time ago, for me to be able to do some of the things I'm doing, I would have had to walk to offices and get these kinds of information. Now I can sit down, so long as there's internet, you can get them. And I don't see us using that powerful tool. And I'll say this, our elite, our leaders, and people they need to read. They need to read. They need to, knowledge is very, very, very important. By the way, Petroleum Revenue Management Act, all those things are based on one assumption. People in this room, like you and I, will read and voice our opinions about some of these things. You see, if you haven't really read your stuff, you wouldn't feel comfortable about saying anything. But if you've read, you know your stuff, you've cross-checked, you also develop that confidence, and then you can talk. You know, if you're a geologist, make sure that you're on top of Ghana's geological survey, what is going on. And express yourself, find ways to impact on these things. Because our whole thing was premised on the idea that the elite would act like a critical voice. And going back to the question about why we are doing the things we're doing, I'll tell you my naivety about some of these things. I sat in Boston writing all kinds of things about the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, thinking that me and my friends were influencing what was going on. You know who was really in the driver's seat? The IMF and the World Bank. They had promised the Ghana government $300 million if they created the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. So that's why it's like, oh, you're giving me 50 cities. Okay, let me do this. I've done it. Now leave me alone. We haven't. I was surprised, but not too surprised. Almost every issue we identified, people had done studies on them in Ghana. I went from GTZ, TEC, everywhere. Nobody even knew where these studies were because they were contracted by our Western partners. We do it, we don't read them, we don't disseminate them. Even at times, the contract says when you publish it, you can't release the information. You want to tell me that $5,000 or $6,000, you're going to control my brain? I'm prepared to go to court. By the way, I'm a constipated lawyer.
I hope the questions have been answered. Okay. So we have networking time. We can interact with ourselves, and those who still have lingering questions can still see him to talk about that. We would ask our guests, our father, Reverend, who walked in. Maybe he has a few words for us to tell us something.
I'm sorry for imposing myself on you in this very august assembly. I was just flipping through the newspapers, and then I saw a lecture supposed to take place here, and then I saw the name of Professor Kwamina Panford, whom I have known since we were young. So I said, oh, he's coming to continue the debate we have been debating. Anytime I have run into him, either in Koforidua or in Boston. And so I would like to come and listen. And I'm sorry I was awfully late. I have to mind my own business as a bishop. I went to work and I left the office because I had calculated you people had put in the newspapers. And this time I'm going to lambast you. You had put in the newspapers. It was supposed to start, is it 9 o'clock till 12:35. You are going to have a meeting. Then after that, you are going to have the lecture. Am I right? Okay. Then the next thing so I read it. So I calculated I should be able to get here on time. Traffic indiscipline, so I missed part of it. But I'm going to give it to you people. GhIG Lodge is not the most well-known lodge anywhere. I beg your pardon, who are you? Ghana Institute of what? Geoscientists. At least geography is one of yours. I expected you to put at least some indicators over there. I beg your pardon. This already is a failure on your part. What geoscientist are you if you cannot even give me the geographical directions? I beg your pardon. So, no, don't laugh at it, don't joke at it. Next time you are organizing something, I would expect at least a signboard at the entrance, a signboard at the... Very, very minute then, because I sure did not see it. I got to the roundabout there, what do you call it there? And then I drove all the way to Ise, trying to look for what GhIG Lodge was. I beg your pardon, next time when you choose a place, make sure it is well indicated. You understand? I just ran into the article in the graphic district. That is why I am here. I'm sorry I missed at least the real substance of the discussion. But when I was listening to you, I would say it boils down to almost the same thing. You understand? Indiscipline, corruption, not thinking. We've remained, very enslaved by our, educational system. We are not going beyond it, and that is all there is. One of my best songs you may have heard me sing is "Emancipate Yourself from Mental Slavery." None but ourselves can free our minds. That's a fact. I'm a Rasta man. I believe in it. Bob Marley is my patron saint, and I believe. But I want you to work it out seriously. And when we say emancipate yourselves from mental slavery, I'm now going to attack you again. Who are the elite? You are the elite. I want you to know that I am looking at you as the elite. I'm only going to deal with it from a very ethical and moral point of view. You are the elite. You have gotten the best of our educational system. I want you to think and give us solutions. I don't want you to give questions. I'm sorry to say so. 60 years into what Ghana is after independence, this is not the time to ask somebody questions. This is the time to propose answers, to propose solutions. I hope you understand that. I know him, we've been debating these things very seriously, and I know one of the things he keeps on saying is that we seem not to be thinking to come up with solutions. We always look at somebody else must be doing the politicians, the this and the that and the that. Whether you like it or not, we live in a very vicious world. Please take it from him and take it from me. Africa is currently in the eye of geopolitical interest, worldwide geopolitical interest, whether you like it or not. But Africa has a lot of potential and a lot of endowment, and Africa must now be ready to stand up with its expertise to use it. We have a lot of potential, and that is a fact. When you talk about natural resources, with all due respect, there is no continent that is endowed as much as we have been endowed. From the smallest little thing to about the biggest, we have been endowed. And that is a fact. And that is why we've gone through 400 years of enslavement, and we are still going through, economic and political and ideological enslavement, and we are helping them with the elite. Why am I saying so? He's had so much exposure, and I thank God for that. I'm sure many of you have had exposures from other parts. Britain, from Germany, parts of Europe, from America and everything. How I wish when we meet, the British are not going to defend the British system. The French are not going to defend the French system. The Americans are not going to defend the American system. We are going to put together that asset which we have of British perspective, American perspective, Chinese perspective, French perspective. Now what does Africa need? Come up with a solution. I'm telling you this, not only you as individual, I'm telling you as a church member. I'm looking at my own church. I was at a conference, and I happened to be one of the African bishops who was there. Were 37 African bishops out of 200 and about 20 of us. We forgot how wealthy we had become because of our colonial past. There were bishops who were francophone, French speaking, bishops who were anglophone, English speaking, bishops who had been trained in Germany and could speak German, bishops who had been trained in Italy and could speak Italian, could speak Portuguese, could speak Spanish. And therefore, when we came face to face with the others, we were about the most global thinkers possible. And yet we all sat there hardly thinking that we should put our resources together and speak from a point of view of knowledge and synergy. We started arguing Francophones. We started arguing Anglophones. Luckily, God being so good, I speak French, I speak German, I speak Spanish, I speak Italian, which I learned all by myself. And so I could see the various cultural, philosophical perspectives that they were coming from. And they were trying to defeat us by that, as if we didn't have a way of thinking. My brothers and my sisters, you've been trained in various universities, KNUST, Kumasi, what do you call it, Cape Coast, Legon and the rest. It's time you stop this elitist mentality and thinking, we are from Legon, we are from this, we are from that. Tell me what solution Ghana needs. From the Legon, from KNUST. I hope you understand that. So we need to start synergizing. I'm happy you're going to do networking. Don't ask questions. Tell us the solutions from your various perspectives, from where you are standing. This is Africa's term to turn our brain drain into a brain gain. Turn our brain drain into a brain gain. That was what Ali Mazrui said about 20 years ago. Yes, we have been enslaved for no fault of ours. We have to think, and I speak English to you because we can't start thinking and speaking maybe in Tree or in Ewe or in Nzima or in which of them I speak and the rest of it. Nevertheless, bring your perspective. Let me bring my perspective, and then let us look at the problem and what solution we can propose. So I beg you, if you are Ghanaian engineer, what geoscientists, I expect to see you come up with papers that have proposals of solutions to the politicians who normally are not professionals in your field, who normally do not have the expertise that you have. And so propose it and defend it, because this is the time of Africa. That one I'll tell you straightforward. Another wealth that Africa has, which many of us have been underrating, is the youngest continent in the world. Statistically, the young people in Africa below the age of 35, they constitute 65% of the population. And I want you to know, don't look at the young people as if they are a burden. Look at them as great big potentials that can be tapped to be able to add onto what we came to meet. Why am I saying that? I was standing on a balcony with a Frenchman one day in Lagos. The bell went, we were overlooking a primary school, and in came the children. About 2,000 kids in this school, running up and down, hustling and bustling, filled with life. I was standing there looking on, and my mind went to when I was in class 2, class 3, enjoying themselves. The Frenchman looked and said, "Africa, you have a problem." I was in a trance. When I came to, I said, "What did you say?" He said, "You have a problem." I said, "No, we don't have a problem. These are our assets. These are our Louis Pasteur. These are our Bill Gates. These are our engineers and the rest. What we need to do is to invest in them, and they in the long run will bring out the solution." So please don't let the Western world keep us giving us the impression of Afro-pessimism. Africa is a lost cause. Africa is not a lost cause. This is the time that our young people are coming up, and they are very, very intuitive and very inquisitive, and they are asking questions, and we must allow them to think beyond us. We've had an education, but our education which we had, whether you and I like it or not, belongs to the past. These young ones, they have a lot of creative thinking that if we would provoke them, they'll come up with better solutions than we have. And so I beg you, if you are teaching the universities and the rest, don't give yourself the impression that you are the ultimate of wisdom. And therefore, if you got, second class upper, no student should get first class upper. Your pride should be that you can move the students to get even better grades than yourselves. Your pride should be that they should stand on your shoulders and reach higher. Don't the lawyer, and therefore he cannot do law. It's absolutely wrong. Oh, you come from where? I remember when I was teaching in Achimota school, a young man came. He had 7 1s. He wanted to go to A level in Achimota school. I asked him which school he was coming from. Some God-forsaken lost school. I said, "Young man, are you sure you made 7 1s and 1 2? He said, "Sir, I did." "Did you choose Achimota school?" He said, "No." I said, "Then how are you going to get in?" He said, "Charlie, I came to force." No. I was touched by the young man. And I said, "Let's see what we can do." And we took him into Achimota school. This was a virgin brain coming from some God-forsaken village. I was brought up in Accra. This is a virgin brain. We took him. He scored 4 straight A's in Achimota school. I only want to say that if you are a teacher, look at your students and make sure that they do better than you did. And so give them all the information they need so that they can recreate and add greater value to yourself and what you are doing. Why am I challenging you? I'm serious about it. I'm very passionate. Ghana, 60 years after independence, we should no more be here complaining. He said he did it because I know him. He wants to push you and me into thinking. Please think. Please give solutions. Don't give questions. We know the questions. Don't give us questions. We know the questions. And we need, as he was saying, to change the society, a critical mass. In any case of osmosis, you need a certain critical mass and concentration. So why don't you come together, create that critical mass, that concentration, so that you can absorb and you can also diffuse. I hope you understand that. So I'm an Osofo. I only came here and I would have loved to have crept into the back when I was late. I don't like being late to programs. But I was happy to hear the strength of the questions that are going on. You are the elite. You are our elite. I'm not looking to anywhere for answers. You should give us the answers. The time is gone. Don't waste your time here. Leave something as a heritage for our dear country, a legacy, so that the young people can stand on and move this country forward. I'm doing mine on the other side. When I meet the politicians, I punch them in the eyes. No problem at all. I tell them straightforward. I don't blame them. They are Ghanaian like you and me. We are very laid back, you know. The Ghanaian has very little ambition. The Ghanaian has very little ambition. I'm sorry to tell you how I wish you were not recording all this. But anyway, go ahead. My son, don't get worried. Let me tell you why. You go to the US, New York. You meet Ghanaians who are there. And their children are content with going to some of these very, second class, third class universities. I'm sorry to say, you meet the Nigerians and they are aspiring that their children go to the, Northeastern, Northwestern, to the Bostons, to the, and the rest of it. Ghanaians, we seem to be content with Kakra Ebedinti. God help us. No kofiu no obaye. I beg your pardon. I hope you understand that. We need a new generation of Ghanaians who are ambitious of this country. As he was saying, he didn't know Kwame Nkrumah, most probably because. But at least I grew up in the time when Ghana was independent. 1957, I was 7 years old. Between that time and when Nkrumah was overthrown, there was that euphoria to be a Ghanaian. You were proud to be a Ghanaian. When I finished, I went to Rome to study at the age of 21. If you were a Ghanaian and you had an O-level certificate, you could go into any university in those days. People went to Oxford University, went into, Cambridge University, and so on and so forth. With all due respect, now when you come back with even your Legon University degree, they have to let you justify your inclusion at an exam. Why is it so? How did that happen? We need to do it. We must aspire to excellence. That's the last one I'll leave to you. And I beg you, it's not somebody must aspire to excellence. All of us must aspire to excellence. When something is done and it is poor, it is badly done, let it be known it is shoddy. It is poorly done. One of the songs that I laughed at every time, I am a shoddy one. So all our shoddy and we are one. We should not be content with the shoddy. No. I will leave you with two little points. I was talking to a dressmaker, and she told me, I have stopped employing Ghanaian girls. And I said, why? He said, Archbishop, they are not serious about doing and learning it properly. Oh, na say yeah. Oh, bay. When it is not good, it is not good. It's no more marketable, and therefore it's not competitive. You watch the paint. They paint it shoddy, and nobody says anything. It's okay. It is not okay. When the Ghanaian is pushed, the Ghanaian can do well, and he can tell you that in America, where they push them, Ghanaians are on top of the business. And many places you go to, people like to take Ghanaians because they know that Ghanaians can deliver. When they come home to Ghana, they think BBI.
Thank you very much. Oh, that's okay. Thank you very much. A word to the wise. Millicent, please come forward and give us the vote of thanks so we can bring this session to a close.
Good afternoon once again, and we are all welcome here. I believe we have all learnt a lot today, and if something is done and it's not done properly, say it. I think my supervisor is one of the people who will tell you straight in the face, do it well. A very big thank you goes to all of us here. We have left whatever we are doing to come here to make this program a success. A special thank you goes to Professor Kwamina Panford. I have been privileged to know him, and I know the work that he can do. Thank you very much, Prof, for sharing with us your rich experience. Another special thank you also goes to Archbishop. Thank you very much. You saw it in the newspaper, and then you thought it good to come. And then when you came, you didn't just sit down, you also voiced out. Thank you very much. And I'm privileged to meet you for the first time, yes, up close. And thank you to the executives of GhIG for putting all these things together, for bringing us together. And I hope that a lot of these things are going to go on. And please, we should all inform our fellow geoscientists when such programs are being organized. We should all come and then voice out. Thank you very much, and you are all welcome to Erie Lodge.
Thank you again. Okay, so closing remarks by our president, Alaji.
I want to say a big thank you to Professor Kwamina Panford. It's a pleasure meeting you for the first time. You really touched my heart. As far as geoscience is concerned, I've always sometimes heard people say comparing Obuasi to GhIG. And I always say that they are not comparable. Because GhIG, the companies there were indigenous, most of them. And they were building their country. In Ghana, we're being exploited, and we are still being exploited. So until we Ghanaians decide that we are going to take our destiny into our own hands, it is going to remain like this. Forget the Newmonts and all the big companies when they come. But if we are happy with the handouts that we are getting, as we have seen even in the petroleum sector, it will continue. We have to decide what we want to do with our natural resources. We must have a plan how we are going to make sure that we do these things ourselves. Fortunately, all is not lost yet. Our country is barely 45% mapped. That's what we know. There is still a lot of work to do. And that is on our shoulders. I remember in 2005 when we were starting the EU project, we decided, my company was one of the companies selected together with the Council for Geoscience and the French Geological Survey to do the mapping. And we decided to choose an area together with the Minerals Commission in the Bui area in the Alta region. We were told that there is nothing there. So we should find another area. Well, insisted. And the reports are very clear. There is huge potential there. There are very strong indications of other metals, including gold there. And so we advise that please don't give out the areas. We have to parcel it out and give it on tender instead of people just going. But that is not enough. What is the stake of the Ghanaian in that? And I'm happy Professor Panford has opened our eyes and has rekindled the fighting spirit in some of us. And Geoscience, the institution, Ghana Institution of Geoscience, we have a lot of work to do. And I ask the Archbishop to also remember us in his prayers, that we will be united in thought and not be divided on the basis of where we have studied or where we come from, to give this nation what is due, what is worth, or what the nation really deserves. So on this note, I say thank you. We'll continue our networking.
So, President has said it all and said Archbishop should remember us in his prayers. So he's going to start remembering us in his prayers from now. And so we'll ask him to give us the closing prayer.
I'm really happy to be here with you, please. There is an Osofutu in your midst. Please come and join me. He looks like me, I look like him. He has a beard like me and the rest. And so we want to pray with you and pray for you in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. God, our Heavenly Father, you've been such a good mother to us in this country. You have endowed us with so much. And you have nurtured us to this opportunity, this time. Lord, there are so many challenges, but every challenge is an opportunity that you give to us to tap into the resources, not the natural ones in the earth, but our brains, our spirits, our souls. I want to thank you for these, your sons and daughters, whom you have endowed with the wisdom of geosciences, so that they may help in recreating our dear country Ghana from its natural resources into a haven as you have desired. Lord, lift up your hands upon them. May your blessings come down upon them. Give them the light of the Holy Spirit every time they approach their work. Enlighten them to know that you have a mission for them. Give them the courage, Lord, that they need when they come into obstacles, and let them know that you are with them. And at the end, may they look back and say, yes, Lord, you have blessed this country and you have blessed them in their work. May your blessings come down upon them in the name of God the Father, and God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you very much. I will soon think of most probably applying for membership. It's only that mine will not be geosciences. Mine will be celestial sciences.
Okay, thank you all for your time. Please, it's time to interact with food. So when you descend, you make a right to the to the restaurant over there. Please, food is waiting. Thank you.